at 4h.org.
Serving Lawrence County since 1951. This is WDXE Lawrenceburg, a broadcast service of Prospect Communications.
More ballot bans. I'm Tom Graham, Fox News. Donald Trump removed from a second primary ballot. Maine Secretary of State Sheena Bellows nixed the former president, citing the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause. Colorado's Supreme Court recently making a similar decision. Fox's Grady Trimble.
The Trump campaign quickly out with a statement saying we are witnessing in real time the attempted theft of an election and the disenfranchisement of the American voter. Campaign also says it'll appeal the decision to Maine state courts. Bellows suspended her ruling until they rule on the case. More than a dozen states are dealing with lawsuits seeking to bar Trump from the ballot. The former president is back on the ballot in Colorado as the state GOP appeals the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So far, President Biden has not weighed in. He's vacationing in the Virgin Islands. They're stepping up security in New York City ahead of the New Year's Eve ball drop. Mayor Eric Adams.
We will be out here with our canines, our horsebacks, our drones, our helicopters, our boats. The full complement of our public safety apparatus will be on display.
There are increased concerns about disruptions after recent police clashes with pro-Palestinian protesters. An effort to ban transgender hormone treatment and other procedures in children falls short. Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine vetoing the state bill.
Parents have looked me in the eye and have told me that but for this treatment, their child would be dead.
The bill would have also barred students assigned male at birth from participating in girls' sports. On Wall Street, stocks finishing in the red on the last trading day of the year. The Dow falling 21 points, S&P 500 dipping 14, the Nasdaq dropped 84. Overall, though, S&P 500 making major gains, jumping more than 24% on the year. America's listening to Fox News.
You've heard the buzz about IT jobs in cybersecurity and AI, right? Why not prepare for a career in these fields and take advantage of the high demand? You could enjoy a more rewarding and recession-resistant lifestyle. Train in just a few short months at My Computer Career. No experience necessary. Already in IT? Skill up for positions employers need to fill. Go to mycomputercareer.edu and take the free career evaluation. That's mycomputercareer.edu. Financial aid is available for qualified students, including the GI Bill.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
On the campaign trail, Republicans continue to criticize President Biden over the latest surge in migrant crossings into the U.S. Candidate Nikki Haley speaking in New Hampshire, urging the president to visit the southern border.
You're not ready for what I saw.
This week, the White House sent key leaders to Mexico City. Officials meeting with Mexican leaders about chaotic mass migration. At the same time, the Biden administration is taking aim at Texas over their effort to quell illegal immigration. Fox's William Longinus.
Texas is trying. Yesterday, however, the administration promised to sue should the state implement a law allowing police to arrest, jail, and prosecute and deport migrants who enter Texas illegally. Now, Texas says Biden's deliberate inaction left it no choice and says it will appeal to the Supreme Court to stop illegal immigration in their state.
Customs Border Protection reporting an all-time record for encounters in December. President Biden renewing calls for Congress to approve tens of billions of dollars more for war-torn Ukraine. Follows the latest assault from Russia.
A barrage of missiles and drones overnight from Russia targeting Ukraine is the largest aerial assault since the war began, President Biden says. In a statement, the president says Ukraine was able to deploy air defense systems provided by the U.S. and allies over the past year and says the American American people can be proud of the lives saved. But without urgent action from Congress, President Biden warns the U.S. will not be able to continue sending weapons and vital air defenses Ukraine needs. The security spending bill, totaling more than $100 billion, has stalled over immigration proposals sought by Republicans. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Poland's defense forces say an unknown object entered that country's airspace this morning, came from the direction of Ukraine and vanished off of radar. Intelligence saying indications are it was Russian. I'm Tom Graham, and this is Fox News.
Hello, everyone. This is Lawrence Sutton, and I got Brandon Taylor with me today, and we're Free Speech News, where we are not politically correct, but biblically correct. And there's two things you're not supposed to discuss in public, and that's politics and religion. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing great, Lawrence. I'm glad to be on the air with you today. How are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm glad to have you on here air with me. I mean, we got a lot of things to talk about. You know, we're going to be talking politics and religion, and, you know, I'm sure we're going to have some people maybe not that happy about it because you're not supposed to discuss it. But that's the problem with our society today, is because we have taken God's word out of society, and you see what happens with the evil and what's coming about with evil. So
absolutely.
Want to start off with, you know, you had shared a verse with me earlier today that was in Luke.
Yes.
And it deals with what California is going through right now. Why don't you kind of give us an update?
Well, you know, of course, I'll start off with the Bible. We'll start with the Bible first. Luke 21:25 says, "And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring."
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd sent you an article that I actually saw on one of your favorite newscasts.
You're talking about Communist News Network,
yeah, Communist
CNN?
News, Communist News Network's where it was at. And and this is today, okay? And it says, "More monster waves will collide with California coast after injuring onlookers and causing serious flooding." That's the headline, more monster waves. And so they're having up to 20-foot plus size waves crashing on the shore. And it's because of storms that are out in the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean right now as we speak, and they're causing just serious flooding damage from waves. It's not raining, it's the waves that are flooding those coastal areas.
Right, right. Well, I tell you what, it's kind of funny. You know, you mentioned the, CNN, Communist News Network. I mean, I'm surprised a good Republican like you would even be watching something like that.
You keep your friends close, or do you keep your enemies?
You keep them closer.
and honestly, I think it's a mistake as a conservative for conservatives to only look at conservative slanted media. And there's some media out there that's really it's conservative, and they're always going to defend the conservatives or defend the Republican. Mm-hmm. And I'm not that way. You know, I want to call it for what it is.
Absolutely.
And I want something that's going to be fair. And I'm a grown man. I can make my own decision on what's fair and what's balanced. And so I don't need Fox News telling me what's fair and balanced.
I'm about to say, you almost sound like Bill O'Reilly over there.
Oh, Bill O'Reilly or Tucker Carlson. I'll take him. How about that?
Well, I'd take Tucker over Bill. That's for sure.
But I'm not mad at Fox News. But no. I think as conservatives, I think it's dangerous, and it's definitely dangerous for those who are liberal to only listen to a liberal slanted news media. And I've been around those people quite a bit, and it's damaging.
You know, why do you think that is? And you know, I kind of tried, make a joke about it, but I'm the same way. You know, I'll listen to all the type of news, and as a matter of fact, a lot of times when I get the news from one source, I want to go look at the other source just to see where things balanced out. My dad always told me that the truth is typically somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
It's not one side and it's not the other side, but if you listen to two sides of a story, mm-hmm. typically you find the truth somewhere in the middle. It's not going to always be on the left side or always on the right side. So, you know, I agree with that. You know, I agree that we all should do that, and we should all kind of look at not only where we get our news from, but when you do it and you look at it on both sides, it gives you that chance to, if you do come across some people that are not maybe conservative, you got good arguing points at that point.
You do, and I love talking politics with people, and I especially like talking politics with people that I may not agree with. If they're willing to have a conversation. I'm not I'm not a name caller. I don't call people names. But what I would love to do is engage in a true conversation and hear people's views, because I believe that as conservatives, I think we have a balanced view of the world today. And I'm not saying we're perfect in every way, but given the opportunity, we can defend our views very easily. And I think sometimes we could win people over, and we start bringing them to our side. If the truth sets you free.
That's right.
That's the point of free speech news. We as conservatives, what's coming against our free speech is speaking the truth, because that truth is damaging to the left's agenda. It's damaging to the liberal agenda. It's damaging to the Democrat Party. That truth really is. And so that's why they hate for us to speak the truth and stay factual. And then they spin it and say, well, they're the ones that follow the science, when they don't. They say they're the ones that are for freedom when they're not. They actually spin the truth and they slant it in a different way, and it's damaging for all of us.
Well, I tell you what is most damaging for us. It's most damaging for the media and the people that perpetuate this. I really think that there's going to come a time, and not only just what God's going to do, but I think there's a reckoning coming in this country, and people that are sick and tired of being sick and tired of getting false information.
Yes.
And I'm starting to see that. I mean, and we could spend numerous programs discussing the false information that's out there, but I think people generally, if they are open-minded and they do look for the truth, they can find it.
Absolutely.
It can be found, but if you're looking at just one type of news source that maybe goes towards your political persuasion, you're not going to get the truth all the time.
That's 100% true.
And that brings me to another point, and it kind of segues into that. Talk about being the truth and the truth in media. It's kind of what's going on right now with Israel and Hamas. Everybody wants to be discussing and talking about, on the left side of things, that Israel doesn't have a right. And a lot of them, when they start chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that right there is actually calling for the genocide of the Jewish people.
Absolutely.
Because they're not talking about how Israel talks and say, part of this needs to belong to the people that claim to be Palestinians. But we've got to be honest here. These people are not Palestinians. Can you name me a Palestinian before 1994? Can you name one Palestinian governor? Can you name one Palestinian president? It's because they didn't exist.
Right.
And the only reason we had it is because the Clinton administration, we had the Oslo Accords.
Yep.
And then that gave the UN the ability to recognize with the Oslo Accords, which Israel signed over for, giving part of Israel to Yasser Arafat, giving part of the, which is Gaza and some other places in Israel, to the Palestinians.
Yep.
Even though, let's face it, the Palestinians, yes, were they there a long time ago? Were they even there in Gaza? Absolutely. But they weren't known as Palestinians then. They were known as Philistines.
That's right.
And that's where Goliath comes from. So if you've heard the name Philistine before, that comes from where Goliath is. But here's the thing, though. God didn't ever give the land to the Philistines.
Yes, that's right.
He gave that land to Israel. And here's the other fact. You get mad at me if you want. I don't care. You can get mad at the Quran even on this. But there's two different instances in the Quran. And I spoke about it before. I don't have the verses, I don't think, right here handy with me.
Okay.
But the Quran states two different places that Israel was actually given to the Jews.
Right.
And this came, and I did find it. It's Surah 26:59, and then Surah 5:21. And then we have Surah Al-Isra 17:109. So I'm sorry, we had three. There's three different verses.
In the Quran.
In the Quran. So they're even going against their own Bible.
Well, their holy land is in Saudi Arabia, Mecca and Medina.
Right. As
They're
a matter
really
of
not concerned
matter of
with
fact,
Israel.
Jerusalem is their third holiest site according to them. And Saudi Arabia came out 2 years ago.
Right.
And said that the MBS, is that what they call him? The guy that heads up Saudi Arabia, MBS.
Yeah, one of those princes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He said that the Jews deserve to be able to build their temple on the Holy Mount because that is their first holy site, not their third.
That's right.
So this guy obviously has read his Quran,
Yep.
where it states that that land belongs to
when
Israel.
When we look at the Temple Mount, it's 35-acre complex.
Yeah.
Okay. And that wall, a lot of that was built around that complex was built by King Herod the Great. Okay. It's the same one who tried to kill Jesus when he was an infant.
That's right.
He built a lot of that because he had what would have been the Jewish nation, or what we would have considered the believers of the Word of God. He had them in his back pocket, and he was paying them money. He had built towers. He had built beautiful places for them, and so he was paying off the religious leaders at that time. But if you look at right now, currently, what's going on in the Middle East, the only people really concerned with Temple Mount are the Palestinians, not Saudi Arabia, not Turkey, Jordan a little bit because they can control it with what's called the Jordanian Waqf, which also owns property in Tennessee, and a lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
The Jordanian Waqf that owns the temple, that controls Temple Mount,
Yes.
controls property in the state of Tennessee. There are any place that has a mosque, they control it, and so they control the.
I did know
there is a
that.
place in Rutherford County that they control.
Yeah,
maybe
Murfreesboro.
Davidson County. It's right there on the line. Maybe in Antioch, right there where it's. I think it's in Antioch, but they've got a place they control there. That's a big center. It's a Muslim community center. Basically, is what they start. Very similar to what we see with nonprofit community centers. Not like a church. They run it differently. But they control that property. They own that property.
But let's be honest, Brandon. A mosque is nothing but nothing not only religious but also political as well.
Well, let me ask this question to those listeners: how many churches are in Saudi Arabia?
None.
That's right. How many churches are in Iran?
None.
None. Because they will never let a Christian own property there.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia doesn't have an open door policy where you can just go over and tour Saudi Arabia openly. I mean, think about this. How many people do you know of saying, we're going to go on a vacation next year and we're going to Saudi Arabia? There's a reason, because you have to have a reason or family to travel there. And if you're not Islamic and you can't prove that you're Islamic, then you're not going to Saudi Arabia on a visit trip.
That's correct.
Guess what? They have closed borders. No, I know. It's not even NPR, and you're getting all this truth. So, but they have closed borders, and they absolutely, if you haven't watched anything about the Hajj, I think a lot of Christians need to get online, watch some documentaries on the Hajj.
Yeah.
That is the once per lifetime, you are required to travel and do the Hajj, and you travel to Mecca, to Medina, and you go into those cities, and they have a ritual trek that they take, and people are there by the millions travel that place. They're sleeping on the sides of the roads. There's no place for them to sleep. They sleep outside, all dressed in white, doing the Hajj. But you're not going there, Lawrence. You can't go there as a Christian without some sort of mosque signing off on your passport going into Saudi Arabia. You don't travel to Saudi Arabia without clearance.
Wow.
Even one of our friends that are friends with their family, Ron Wyatt.
That's
people
right.
Want to look him up. I know their family very well. Look at ronwyatt.com. I know this family very, very close. He actually went into Saudi Arabia, and this is a fact. They held him for 78 days against his will. This was in the 80s. Wouldn't let him talk to any U.S. counterpart. Wouldn't let him talk to anyone at an embassy or anything like that. Held him and his sons. It's on. You can go online and look at the CBS This Morning news report when they got off the plane, and they held him for 78 days. And they just won a suit in international court about 5 or 6 years ago. The Wyatt family. Ron died in 1999, but
Right.
They just won a suit where they violated all their human rights over there. They separated all three of them, accused them of being Israeli spies. You don't travel to Saudi Arabia. These peace-loving Muslims, we're not going there. And so I'll say something on the church side. I feel like I'm kind of on a soapbox here on your show.
No, that's fine. That's what we're here for.
You'll hear people, and I'm probably going to make someone mad, and they talk about they're going on missions trips. And I love missions. I have a good friend, Joel Bukenya, in Uganda.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, Joel Bukenya doesn't need a missionary. Joel Bukenya needs to come preach to the Americans because they're the ones that still have it.
Amen.
The African
Matter of fact,
nations,
Joel has said, and I've heard him say it.
Yes.
That they actually pray for the salvation of America.
That's exactly right. 1,000 kids in that orphanage. He is in Uganda. He is a Ugandan pastor. And
Yeah.
He has 1,000 kids in that orphanage. And so honestly, I mean, we could go there and preach, and doors open for me to go there anytime I want to go.
Right.
But that's not.
You're
the
preaching
mission
to the
field.
preacher at that point.
Yeah,
You really are.
I want him to come preach to us. He does a great job when he comes here.
That's right.
But. And maybe if he's back next year, we can have him on your show or something. He would
Yeah,
love it. He's
yeah.
a great guy.
Yeah.
But
Well, I've met him 2 or 3 times.
the real mission field is the 1040 window.
Right.
And if people don't know,
Explain the
most Christians,
1040 window
it's
to people.
The 10th parallel to the 40th parallel latitude lines.
Yep.
And 10th and the 40th degree. So there is a portion of the earth in that 1040 window where you can't get missionaries in there. I mean, they will kill missionaries. They'll burn their houses if they go there and preach Christ. It's against the law to go there. That's the area. That's the part of the earth that has not heard of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And there's so many different elements of the New Testament and Old Testament prophetic word that's coming to pass even in our lifetime. One of those is that the gospel would be preached around the earth.
Right.
So the last place that the gospel is going to be preached is Jerusalem. The Chinese have been handed the baton, and the Chinese are going into the 1040 window, not America.
That's correct.
There is great revival happening in China right now.
Yes, there is. Even though they're underground and they're persecuted.
Underground, yes.
I mean, they're being killed.
Nothing can be higher than the government in China.
That's correct.
So the crosses on churches or anything like that have to be lower, and the government is held up higher than anything else. And
kind of like the church is here today.
And they have appointed people that will sit in on the services in China, and they have government officials that sit in to make sure that the preachers are preaching pro-government messages. How many preachers in America are already preaching pro-government messages right now?
Well, everyone that has a 501c3 is. I mean, I hate saying it.
Well,
but when you have gone and have gotten a 501c3, and for people that don't understand, that makes the church nonprofit at that point. And you're stating then that you're putting the government above God.
You know what 501c3 really legally, and I've been told this, I've not researched it, so if someone looks it up and they see it differently, then I stand corrected.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been told from the legal side of this is a 501c3 is technically an entity that does not exist.
That's right.
So you're labeling yourself as an entity that does not exist as a 501c3 in the legal terms.
Just so you can get a tax break, and the people that donate to the churches get tax breaks. But didn't Jesus tell us or warn us, when it comes to giving, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing?
Well, I'm going to say something really radical on your show.
Yeah.
I know you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm definitely okay.
But if you want a tax break for your church, get involved in politics.
Explain.
If the church wants to see taxes cut for the churches or for anyone, I mean, I'm for small government and big freedom.
We got way too much government.
So, I mean, if you want to see your taxes cut, then we need to get responsible, law-abiding citizens that attend church, are believers, that follow the gospel of Jesus Christ involved in politics. And the taxes will be cut because we're going to be responsible with that money. And are we perfect? No, please don't. And I know people make mistakes, but still there's more responsibility that lies, because the Bible says that when the wicked rule, the people mourn, but when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. So if you want to rejoice in the tax code, then you need to run for office.
Amen.
I'm just using that scripture. But going back to the 1040 window, the Chinese have literally been handed the baton. And when I say handed the baton, I mean by the Holy Spirit guiding them. And they're going into the 1040 window, and they go as far as they can until they're killed. And they're literally killing Chinese missionaries in the 1040 window.
Wow.
And
so
they go as
what
far
part
as
of these countries other than Israel is part of the 1040 window?
It goes through India. I'll tell you how you look it up. It goes the old Silk Trade Route.
Okay.
And so the old Silk Trade Route is being reopened. And as they're trying to reopen the Silk Trade Route from a couple thousand years ago, what they're doing is, as they're coming through that, they're bringing electricity and internet into a region that has never had it. And they're in darkness. They literally are in darkness. They have no other outside world communication. And as they're bringing this technology in through these areas and just AM radio and things like that are being broadcast. And one of the best ways they're getting the gospel out right now is they're downloading the gospel on MP3 players. And it's just a very small MP3 player, about the size of a matchbox. And it has just
they
earbuds.
Can hide it. Yeah,
they can hide it, and it's not the written gospel, because they can be killed in some of these countries for having the Bible.
Right.
I mean, America, we have the Bible and we don't read it, but North Korea, people die for it.
That's right.
And they share different pieces of the book and bring it together and try to read it. But great is going to be the reward one day as well. And we are going to whom much is given, much is expected. We have a much required of us as Americans, and we're not living up to it, in my opinion.
No, we're not, and that's the reason China's been given.
And I'm guilty.
We're all guilty. But back in the you take America from 50s probably through the 90s. There was a lot of missionaries. There was a lot of missions going out. There was a lot of spreading of the gospel.
Sure.
Up until, like I said, probably around 2000, maybe even. And now America has really cut back on their missions and what they're doing, and now it seems like the only thing we're bringing since 9/11, the only thing we've been bringing is soldiers and wars to these other countries, and not bringing Jesus Christ and the gospel.
Well, we're afraid we'll offend people. And we're always been afraid that we're going to offend someone. And
so help me out.
Let me say one more thing on
Okay,
that before
okay.
I forget, and
All right.
and we'll get into that. But I want to say this before I forget it. The Chinese believe, and they're preaching, that when they reach Jerusalem, and their goal is to go through the 1040 window, get to Jerusalem, they believe that at the same time they get to Jerusalem, Jesus Christ will return, because they have made the full encompassing of the globe.
It's kind of funny. Now you're going to get me on another rabbit hole. I'm thinking about Revelation when it says when the river Euphrates dries up, then 200 million man army, the kings from the east, comes over the Euphrates River.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's all fitting in. I mean, it all is working together. And China is a major player in the world today.
Absolutely.
They're rising up against Taiwan right now. We have a weak president. Democrats don't even think he's a strong president, so don't even give me that. Democrats know he's weak. He looks weak. We look weak. America seems weak. And so China's going to make a stand against Taiwan, and we're all wondering, when is this going to happen? But I believe that China is watching and waiting to see what's going on in the Middle East, and they're going to be very strategic about how they play this. And as soon as we get tied in the Middle East, and I'll just go ahead and go on the record and say there is a big push to get the United States tied in on this Middle East war right now.
Absolutely.
And it's expanding.
I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to put words in the man's mouth, but Scott Desjardins, when we had him on here last week in studio, he basically said, we're looking at war right now.
Yeah, we are. We are.
And
they want a war.
And I'd have to go back and listen to exactly what he said, but as soon as he said it, and I was sitting right where you were sitting, I'm like, oh.
Well, who would it benefit? It would benefit Russia. It would benefit China. It would benefit Saudi Arabia if we got in a conflict, because OPEC's going to turn the dial up. These people get rich when we go to war. They make a lot of money.
And that's America's thought process too, is that if we go to the war, we might can get ourselves out of this mess that we are in through war.
Well, and I want to say something, and I'm not disagreeing with you when you were saying that we've been in other countries for years, but we have bases all over the world, military bases. Germany has a large military base. After World War II, the United States military went in there and built a large base. Most people don't know this, but the largest hospital on the planet is in Germany on that military base.
Yeah, see, I did
not
know that.
We help more people there. They train people there. Even my own son, who's in the military, they're talking about sending him to Germany, and he's a combat medic. and they're going to get training there on foreign soil.
Isn't that kind of funny that you mentioned that about Germany? And Germany, here again, last week or so, Germany came out, and for the first time since World War II, they're actually putting soldiers on foreign land. The first time since World War II, Germany's putting soldiers on foreign land.
Sure.
And I thought that was kind of interesting.
It is interesting. But we've been a peacekeeper. We're in other countries, and some people will say, well, I don't think we should be in other nations. And I agree with them. I'm not disagreeing with them.
Right.
But what happened to Afghanistan when we pulled out? Those people were much safer with military troops on the ground over there. The region was safer. The world was safer. When we pulled out of Afghanistan, Joe Biden, and if you voted for him, you voted for the pullout of Afghanistan. You own part of that. But he pulled out of Afghanistan. That place fell apart within minutes. China was waiting to go. The number one thing in Afghanistan is lithium. I know you got something you want to say.
I'm not going to say it on air, though. I'm just...
It's killing you.
It's killing me. Yeah, it is.
You're holding it in.
I'm holding it in. I'm going to keep it held in. I might tell you later, but...
I thought you looked like a jack in a box, like you're fixing to spring out on me there.
Oh, my God.
But, so we've kept peace in a lot of regions, and it's cost us money, and I know that some of these wars have cost a lot of money, but it's because those regions are very hostile regions. We talked about in here on Wednesday, you and I together, how many 56 different attacks have happened since mid-October in Iraq through the Iranian-backed terrorist organizations.
Well, they're flushed with cash because the Biden administration on September 11 gave them over $1 billion. Gave them over $1 billion on September the 11th.
I didn't read that on CNN, by the way.
Oh, you're not going to either. But you can Google it. I mean, even Google doesn't suppress
NPR
this.
didn't talk about it either.
I mean, even Google's not suppressing this information.
Right.
But I mean, the Biden administration gave $1 billion to Iran. And it's kind of funny how all of a sudden Hamas attacks Israel 3 weeks later. And like you said, we're getting all these attacks. We're having the Houthis are launching bombs for the first time. And then we have Hezbollah that's been launching attacks on Israel. And they're all funded by Iran. Oops, I meant the United States.
Oh, yes.
Because we gave them that money to do this.
So last night, even, it's in the news that Israel attacked a air base, or it may be an airport, in Damascus.
In Damascus, that's
Killed
right.
11 top Iranian military officials in Damascus last night.
And what are they doing in Syria?
Plotting and planning war.
That's correct.
That's exactly what they're doing. And they're using Syria, which is a very
unstable.
Volatile,
They're very unstable,
region to play out of. And they're basically over there where whoever has the most money wins. So they're paying their way into Syria is what they're doing.
That's
they're paying
right.
off the Syrian government.
Assad's getting rich.
He's getting rich off of our money.
But you know what, Assad, you used to hear all the time about Assad and things right now, but you haven't heard about Assad in years.
I haven't heard a word about him.
I know. And it's kind of funny that that's happening, but, it's ripe for, and there's a prophecy, I believe it's in Isaiah, when it talks about that Damascus is destroyed. And ever since that was written by Isaiah, and we're talking...
Isaiah 17, I believe.
Well, what are we talking about, 3,500 years ago when Isaiah was written?
Probably not quite that far, but 2,500 years.
2,500, okay. So we know that Damascus has never been destroyed.
Yep. It's the oldest inhabited city on the earth.
That's correct.
It's mentioned in Genesis when... Abraham mentions, he says, I don't want my servant to be, and Eleazar. I didn't want him. I'm trying to think of these names. Didn't want Eleazar to get all of his inheritance. Eleazar from Damascus. So Abraham's servant was from Damascus, and he was like, when I say servant, wasn't like a slave. He was like his top in command of all the people there in his household. But he was going to give him all of his inheritance. But
and that was 3,500 years ago.
Yeah, that's or more. Yeah. So
that's where I got that 3,500 years from Syria.
Yeah, but Damascus has been an inhabited city all this time. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something neat. If listeners want to go look at it, go look up Damascus Straight Street. Straight Street is mentioned in the Bible, and it's mentioned Paul went to Straight Street when he was blinded. He was on the road to Damascus.
Road to Damascus,
and
that's
he
right.
went down. Straight Street is still there, Lawrence. Did you know it?
I did
It's
not.
still there. It's an ancient street, and the archways are still there. And there's actually vendors and businesses on Straight Street to this day. They've been there since before the times of Paul, and it's mentioned in the Bible in the city of Damascus. But the Bible tells us there's a time coming to when there will be no one to run the wild animals out of the streets of Damascus. So you will see reports of Straight Street with wild goats and animals and different things, just wildlife roaming the streets, which sounds like a nuclear attack. It sounds like a Chernobyl event is what it sounds like.
Right. Well, and Damascus doesn't have a Chernobyl inside of Damascus.
No.
So I'm trying to think, a nuclear plant. They don't have a nuclear plant.
No reactors there.
So that sounds like it's war then that happens.
It does. It does. And so we're looking at, it's getting close whenever you see Israel, brave enough to fly F-35 planes. What's amazing on this is all of our technology that's involved in this war. The United States is funding the Iranian terrorists. They're taking missiles they're buying using our ammunitions and weapons.
That's right.
Then the Israelis using our F-35 planes. They call them F-35I.
And the money that we give Israel too.
The only thing the Israeli does with the F-35 jets that we give them, fighter jets, they call them F-35I when they become Israeli. They put bigger fuel tanks on them so they can fly further and they can bomb further. And so that's what they do. They said, we got it. You guys in America, you don't have enough range on those planes. We got to be able to fly a long ways, and they are fast movers.
Yeah.
But they literally use bigger fuel cells. So our planes are over there dropping bombs on our own munitions that we funded on that side. Isn't that amazing when you think about it? Makes the world seem a little smaller to me.
Well, it not only makes the world seem a little bit smaller, but it is bringing up the point that I made earlier, is that the only thing it seems like we brought in the last 20 years is the only thing we're bringing is war.
Yeah.
We're not bringing the gospel of Christ. If you want to call it peacekeeping, okay. I mean, if that's what you want to call it. And I understand, what you're talking about with Afghanistan. Afghanistan's definitely not any freer or any better off than they were. But you know what? Even back in the 80s, Russia tried to invade Afghanistan, and ask Russia how that turned out for them.
Failed miserably.
They did fail miserably. So, and, I want to get back on Israel and what's going on with Hamas, because now we're starting to hear what's happening with the hostages that have been released and what they're reporting.
Okay, yeah.
And I would really like, kind of sit back and kind of talk about it, because I really view a lot of what happens. And a lot of people, they keep looking for America in the end times. But the fact is, Israel is going to be the center point of the end times events.
Absolutely.
It's not going to be America.
Absolutely.
As much as us as Americans would like to think it is, that's just not the case.
You know what we are in America? We're iron mixed with clay. Right now, what you see in America and the divide and the stark contrast,
iron mixed with miry clay.
And clay. And one side is literally iron, holding fast to truth, not bending, not giving in, and the other side is clay, crumbles. We even use other terms for people that are snowflake, and snowflake means you melt on contact. But really, they're not snowflakes. They're really just clay. And they have no structure, no standing. And what else is clay? Clay can be molded and shaped into whatever it can be. And it's pliable.
But it's not strong.
It's not strong, but it's always changing. It's more fluid. I'm just being honest.
I like how you're going with this.
I'm just telling you. I mean, so a lot of people don't realize
this is awesome.
Very prophetic. And people say, well, America's never been this divided. It's because America's never been iron mixed with clay. This generation is the generation iron mixed with clay. And that's, Daniel said this last generation was going to be iron mixed with clay. It's not going to change. But what's happening is you're seeing the iron be more refined right now. You're seeing people that are really willing to stand up and to make a stand. And thank God for what you're doing, Lawrence, and people around us and some of our friends. And we go to the state capitol. We're getting involved because people are iron.
Right.
And, are we perfect?
Iron
Absolutely
sharpens
not.
iron, too.
And iron sharpens iron. And I'll add another layer to that one. You can't sharpen iron with stainless steel.
No,
you can
can't.
only sharpen iron with the same grade of iron. So when you're around someone as a believer and you feel that person sharpening you up, then you are the same grade of iron as that individual. If you try to sharpen iron with stainless steel or another grade of iron, it'll dull both. Both become dulled. But what we see in America is 100%. I believe this with everything that's within me. What you're seeing in your news, when you watch and you see one political side says, we believe that men should be able to compete in women's sports. That's clay. That's clay. It's moldable. It's changeable. It's
fluid.
It's
I like that.
Fluid.
Yeah, we're going to use their words against
That's
them.
exactly what it is.
It's fluid.
And what do they want to do? They want to change what they were created as. Iron, you talk to people who are iron, and they feel like I'm not changeable. I don't feel like I can be changed the way I was created. And I know I'm on a hot topic right now.
No, keep going.
But
because
if the church would recognize who they are and where they are right now, if they recognize that they were iron, I think they would stay stronger. But if this entire nation became clay, it would crumble. So let me give this word of peace to everyone out there. There's going to be iron and clay until the very end. That it will never go away. There will be iron, but the iron is going to be the structure that holds this together. What is the iron? Those are the ones who are the taxpayers, not asking for the government to do it for me, not asking for someone else to take a handout. We don't believe in redistribution of wealth. What do we believe? We believe you should go out and you should be a good citizen and go out and provide for your families. And if you were born a man, if you were born a boy, you'll die a man. We believe those things. And the clay is totally different. The clay is weak. It's fear. Fear is eat up all over America now, and that's what COVID played upon. COVID played upon the clay, not the iron. I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense to me. And when you said what you did, I keep going back, and I don't know why.
You're going to use this again, aren't you?
I will use it a lot because I keep going back to Romans chapter 1.
Yeah.
And people don't look at Romans chapter 1 as being anything prophetic. Mm-hmm. But it is so prophetic it's not even funny. And I'm just going to read a couple of Bible verses from Romans chapter 1 with what you said. And I'm going to start with verse 24. Mm-hmm. And it says, "Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Mm-hmm. For this cause God gave them up until vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one towards another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was met." And I'm going to read this one last one. "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient."
Well, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to take it one step further.
Yeah.
Whenever this was written about iron and clay,
mm-hmm.
Iron, do you know where the source of iron came from at that time? Meteors.
Yeah, meteors, yeah.
Okay, they weren't it was Bronze Age.
That's correct.
This was during the Bronze Age. They had iron, but it was used as special utensils and tools.
Right.
It wasn't even necessarily used in battle. It was more of a sacred thing. And so you have iron and you have clay. Well, you're comparing a heavenly metal, I hope this makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me so far.
To a earth-based material, which is nothing more than clay. And so what you're seeing is the clay is what? The flesh. You're seeing people seek after the will of the flesh, and you're seeing more people who are more of heavenly minded, in my opinion. So,
well, I tell you what,
I love talking about this.
I do too. But I have had this now for 3 weeks to discuss, and we just have not had time.
You're going to have to go with it because you're going to run out of time. Fastest moving hour.
Fastest moving hour, but I got 15 minutes still.
Okay.
And I think I can do this in about 5 to 7.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit what's going on with inflation, because people are getting the wrong information from the news when it comes
good economy.
From this economy.
Have you not watched the news? This good economy.
Biden said it's the best economy of all time, didn't he?
CNN even reported that. So,
but I know the people that are listening to our program, or at least most of them, know that that's not true.
Right.
Okay? And if you don't believe it and you think this is the best economy in the world, I want to know where you're working and where you're shopping at.
You're Clay.
Okay? I'm just going to tell you. Yeah, you're Clay. Just like our buddy Clay Doggett. I just had to throw that in. I'm sorry.
Clay, I want to give an official apology for Clay Doggett right now. I did not mean to set Lawrence in that direction.
I'm just sorry. That's where my mind went. I couldn't help it. Sorry, Clay.
Clay Doggett is
Love
iron,
you, Clay.
I'm telling you.
He is iron. So I want to talk about what's going on in our economy and why we have inflation like we do. So every dollar printed is issued as an instrument of debt. Do you know that the dollar that you have, it's backed by the federal government, the Federal Reserve, and it is a debt instrument. Go read your dollar bill yourself, okay?
IOU.
IOU.
Yep.
So let me ask you something. How does a debt pay back a debt?
With interest. That's just the first thing that popped in my mind. It doesn't happen.
It doesn't. That's my whole point.
Because you spiral downhill with interest, and that's where you get inflation.
That's where you get inflation, and that's where I'm coming at with this. So our money supply right now is $21 trillion is what is in our money supply today. Back in 2020, so only 3 years ago, it was only $15 trillion. So we have had right at a 40% increase in the amount of money that has been printed. Have you seen groceries and everything else going up about 40%?
That's right.
Or more? So the numbers don't lie, okay? I've always had this saying, figures lie and liars figure, but I'm giving you the numbers and you can do with it what you want.
Right.
Okay? So here's the problem. We have $21 trillion of money in our going around right now throughout the world, not just the United States, throughout the world. Some of it found its way to Iran, unfortunately. Thank you, Barack Obama.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, and Joe Biden administration. So our government debt right now, when I did this, was $33.5 trillion. That's how much the government owes. Household debt right now is at $17 trillion. Then we have corporate debt, and corporate debt is at $65 trillion. So right now, we have $115 trillion that's owed, and we only have $21 trillion in circulation.
Wow.
What do you think's going to happen, Brandon? Especially when we're talking about the higher interest rates. Let me tell you why higher interest rates are so bad and what it's going to lead to is because you're going to see more and more bank failures because the banks are having to take money in, and when they take money in right now, they're having to give 3, 4, 5% interest on that money to the people since interest rates have gone up. But guess what? They're sitting on a lot of government instruments right now that are paying 2% or less on government bonds.
That's right.
So you're going to see more bank failures happening. That arbitrage, that's what it's called. It's called an arbitrage between what a bank is investing and what they're having to give out. And I tell you what else it leads to. It leads to banks giving more and more riskier loans in order to try to come up with the money to pay their depositors.
Wow.
The other thing is, too, and most people don't understand this, but for every $100 that somebody puts into the bank is only required, based upon the Frank-Dodd Act of 2012, they're only required to keep $1 of it. They can take the other 99 and invest it in other things. Okay? Before the Frank-Dodd Act, and the Frank-Dodd Act came out because of 2007, 2008, and 2009, the economic crisis.
Technically, you've invested in someone else's debt.
You have.
That's how it works. That's how the banking system works.
That's how and it's called rehypothecation is what that's called.
Ooh.
That's a big word.
Is that from Tennessee?
Oh, no, I don't think that's from Tennessee or Florida. I don't know where that word's from, but it's called rehypothecation is what it's called.
Okay.
Now, here's the other crazy part about this, is we had a interest rate increase from 1940 to 1980. We had a kind of like a straight little increase in interest. And then starting in 1980, and after Reagan became president in 81, we started seeing the interest rates go down, and it declined almost to nothing back to 2020.
Right.
Okay. Now we have had interest rates started going up for the last 3 years, or really the last 2 years. Here's the crazy part also, is the last 2 years the interest rates have risen so much, it is the largest rate increase in history of the United States.
Wow.
So I'm telling you, and it gets even worse. So
because we're not done yet.
We're not done yet, no. So the cost of servicing debt is cheaper when you have low interest rates. Okay?
Yep.
So, and I'm going to give you an example of this. This is the best way I know how to give this example. Back in 1980, or even 1990 even, you had a $10,000 on a credit card, you're probably paying 20% interest on that. So you're paying $2,000 a year interest on $10,000 in debt on a credit card. Well, guess what? As interest rates went lower, you had to pay less amount on that debt, and people started borrowing more and more money because they were having to pay the same amount on the debt,
right,
to where
payments stayed the same.
Payments stayed the same, where you had some credit cards that were running 2% interest. So you could go and get $100,000 in credit card debt and pay the same back in 2020 as you did with $10,000 in debt in 1990.
Wow.
Maybe even 2000 even. So now the chickens are coming home to roost, because now we have interest rates going up and up. And what's happening with this is that people are having to pay more money to service that debt. Well, guess what? So is the U.S. government.
And I'll say this, our number one enemy when it comes to the financial world and the dollar being the standard is China. And
yes,
what a lot of people don't realize is China was not in 1995, in 1999, and 2001 was not where it is today. It was not in a position to create a standard for its money.
That's correct.
And so now they are.
They are, and not only are they doing it, but then they're also going with what's called the BRICS nations,
Yep.
which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Which wants to break the United States.
Right, and they're pulling their resources, and they're pulling their money, and they're pulling the gold and silver that they've been buying in order to create a currency to match or exceed even the dollar. And when you look at those countries that make up the BRICS nation, you're talking about countries that make up more, a lot more actually, in land mass and population than America can even think about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, those
large
economies.
portion of the earth.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, you're talking about 40% of the earth
Yeah.
in population is what you're talking about. Maybe a little more. Okay? So, I'm going to tell you something. We have 4 options to get out of this mess. Okay? That we have. And people say, oh, we'll never be able to pay back the $33 trillion. This, is gone too far. And you might be right. But I'm going to give you what options there are instead of just saying this. So the one that could happen would be a debt jubilee. Now, you're familiar with jubilees and debt jubilees. Israel has practiced this for the last 4,000 years plus.
Sure.
Because every 50 years, they would get back their land if they didn't have their land, and then they would also, anything that was taken from them would be returned to them.
You know what that eliminated?
What did that eliminate?
Redistribution of wealth.
Wow. Never thought of it like that.
That's what it eliminated. Redistribution of wealth is evil.
It absolutely is. It's one of the worst things going.
The church should take care of the poor. The church should. The
government has no business in it.
We've tried to let the government be the church. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no. I mean
that's what the Jubilee does.
So, and we've seen debt cancellation happen and before in war with Germany and Japan as an example. Okay, but it means you got your butts kicked.
Yeah.
To have that debt canceled. So that's the first thing. And
Somebody else owns you at that point.
That's correct. I don't like that option,
No,
but this is an option.
Yeah.
Okay. The other option is called deflation. Now, deflationary happened in the Great Depression. That's when there was not enough money and goods and services became a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can actually get out of a debt situation by going through deflation because there's no money around. So your deflationary, it'll actually create a death spiral for the money because it'll keep the money out of circulation. The money will evaporate, prices will collapse, and then what the government did to get out of the Great Depression is two things. One, they confiscated all the gold from the people, and they used the gold to back the money. And then they took and raised the price of gold from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce to justify the borrowing to get to what did they do? To go into World War II.
Yeah.
So that can happen also. And war, we know, can produce outpouring of boom in an economy.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to tell you something. And I mentioned it before. Desjardins kind of mentioned we might be staring at war in the United States.
Well, what's our number one export? What's one of our number one exports?
It's war.
It's military.
It's military equipments and stuff. Other countries are allowed to have our guns, but the American citizen's not allowed to have their own guns. Mm-hmm. How does that make sense? Can you help me with that? Help me with the logistical thinking of the Democrat with that.
A logistical thing of a Democrat?
Yeah.
Well, there is no logistical thinking with a Democrat.
Okay.
They don't even understand firearms. So when you think that a AR-15 does so much damage you can't deer hunt with it, then you're out of the conversation at that point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely beyond help. Here's the last one that can happen is inflation, and that's printing of money. So in order to print our way out of debt, completely out of debt, we would have to print 6 times the amount of money that we currently have in circulation to get us out of debt. And I'm trying to make it simple here.
Well, they're trying to do that.
They absolutely are. But see, this is where I say the inflation is coming from. Inflation comes from government overspending. The overspending comes from the government of printing of the money. So theoretically, in order to get us out of debt, we could do that. But then we're going to be looking at $18, $20 a gallon for gas or milk, or $18 or $20 for a loaf of bread. So, I mean, is it possible? Yeah, it can happen. So, I want to.
Is that biblical? Where you work all day for a meal?
It's absolutely. It's in that in Revelation. It talks about that. You have to work all day for your meal.
It isn't
before Christ comes back.
Revelation. Yep.
So, but see, this is not just America. But you know what? Here's the thing. Right now, currently, most countries still use the dollar as its go-to money.
Sure.
All right. So that's happening. But I'm going to tell you something. It will happen here first before that spreads to the other countries. From what I'm seeing, from what I believe in the Bible, from what I'm seeing happening right now, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen here first as far as the massive inflation. So I want to touch back again, and then we're almost done, with what happens with banks, okay, with the money. So a bank right now, if they're sitting on a $100,000 government bond only paying 2%, they're only going to get $2,000 a year for that bond. So why would anybody buy that bond at 2% when they can go to the government right now and buy another bond for 5%?
5%, yep.
Okay, so they'll get $5,000. So they'll get $5,000 a year. So what winds up happening is that bond loses 60% of its value. So the bank is holding an asset that used to be worth $100,000 is now only worth $40,000.
Wow!
And they're going to be losing out on, if it's a 20-year bond, they're going to be losing out on $60,000 of income on top of it. So that's why I said the banks are in trouble. Fastest moving hour. Brandon, I want you to take us out. It's 5:59.
Well, I just want to say God bless everyone. Merry Christmas for this week. Happy New Year, the upcoming year.
Yes.
And you know what? Make a stand. That's what we're doing. We don't get paid to do this. Make a stand. God will bless you and your family for it. May God bless Lawrence County, and may God bless the United States of America. It's a great place to live. It's still a Christian nation.
It still is, and I tell you this, I pray for our country. I pray
This
for our
is
state.
WDXE, W287AA, and W237FD Lawrenceburg. Broadcast services of